I want to talk to you about the wall you've been building. You call it self-improvement. You call it the grind. You've spent the last year optimizing every single waking second of your life. You're hitting the gym at 500 a.m. You're cold plunging into ice water to callous your mind. And you're listening to podcasts that tell you that if you show a woman you need her, you've already lost. But I want to ask you a very honest question, and I want you to be real with yourself. Why is it that the more high value you become on paper, the more isolated you feel in your own bedroom? There is a quiet epidemic happening right now in the world of bro self-help. We are teaching men that the ultimate goal of masculinity is total self-reliance. To be a closed circuit that needs nothing and no one. We've turned stoicism into a buzzword for emotional numbness. We've turned frame into a cage. Think about it this way: you're building a fortress. You've reinforced the gates, you've sharpened the spikes on the walls, and you're standing at the top, looking down, feeling completely confuckwithable. But then you look behind you and realize there is no one inside the castle with you. You've made yourself so strong that you've become untouchable. Literally, no one can touch you, no one can reach you, and eventually, no one even wants to try. I remember talking to a man recently who had followed every alpha rule in the book. He was fit, he was wealthy, and he was dominant. He told me, "Matthew, I've done everything they told me to do, but I feel like I'm living behind a sheet of bulletproof glass. I can see my wife, I can hear her, but I can't actually feel her. And she told me last night she's never felt more alone." That is the price of the Ombro self-help lie. It teaches you how to be a provider and a protector, but it fails to teach you how to be a partner. It teaches you how to conquer, but not how to connect. We are confusing emotional control with emotional absence. The truth is, it doesn't take strength to shut down. Shutting down is easy. It's a survival mechanism we've used since we were children to avoid being hurt. Real strength, the kind of strength that actually sustains a long-term, passionate relationship, is the ability to remain open when everything in your biology wants to close off. If you continue down this path of hyper-independence, you aren't becoming a leader, you're becoming a ghost. You're optimizing yourself for a world where you don't need anyone, only to realize that a life where you don't need anyone is a life where you don't belong to anyone. To understand why this fortress feels so heavy, we have to look back at a perspective that predates podcasts and algorithms by thousands of years. I want you to sit with a specific Zen concept for a moment, the paradox of the empty cup. I want you to realize that the most alpha thing you can possibly do is to be the person who is brave enough to be seen. It's easy to be a stone. Anyone can be a stone. It takes zero effort to shut down and be mysterious or detached. That's just cowardice masquerading as masculine stoicism. But it takes incredible strength to look at the person you love and say, "I'm struggling with this," or "I need you right now." That is true power. That is a man who is so secure in his own skin that he doesn't need to perform strength to prove he has it. Think about the legacy you're leaving. Do you want to be remembered as a man who was efficient or a man who was significant? Significance only happens in the space between two people. It happens in the moments where you drop the act and let the light in. I know it feels risky. I know your brain is screaming that if you let that wall down, you'll be manipulated or you'll lose your edge. But I promise you, your edge doesn't come from your armor, it comes from your spirit. A sword isn't strong because it's thick, it's strong because of the way it's tempered. It has been through the fire and it has learned how to bend without breaking. Stop treating your relationship like a performance review. Stop treating your partner like a distraction from your goals. She is not a distraction. She is the reason the goals matter. If you can't share the view from the top with her, then the view isn't worth the climb. So tonight, when you go home, I want you to do something radical. I want you to put down the phone. I want you to step out of the self-help persona you've been wearing all day. I want you to sit across from her. Look her in the eyes and just be there. No fixing, no optimizing, no frame. Just you. Because the world doesn't need more fuckwithable men. It needs more men who are unbreakable, because they are connected to something bigger than themselves. You've spent enough time working on the self. It's time to start working on the soul. It's time to come back to the human race. You'll find that when you finally let someone in, the world doesn't get scarier. It gets a lot more quiet. And for the first time in a long time, you might actually feel like you're home. I've put together a specific guide on how to have these first disclosure conversations without it feeling forced or awkward. Would you like me to share that with you next? The fourth step is moving from the solitary hunter to the tribal leader. The bro narrative loves the image of the lone wolf, but I remember reading a study on actual wolf packs, and it turns out the alpha isn't the most aggressive or detached one. The leader of the pack is the one who ensures the group stays connected and protected. Your leadership in your relationship shouldn't be defined by how much you can dictate, but by how much safety you can provide. And I don't just mean physical or financial safety. I mean psychological safety. Does your partner feel like she can be her full, messy self around you without you judging her or withdrawing your affection? If the answer is no, you aren't leading. You're just managing a hostage situation. Finally, I want you to practice co-regulation. Next time you feel that urge to pull away, when you feel that cringe or that numbness hit you because things are getting too emotional, I want you to do the opposite of what your bro training tells you. Instead of leaving the room or getting on your phone, I want you to move physically closer. Hold her hand. Give her a hug. You don't even have to speak. What you're doing is retraining your nervous system to realize that connection is a place of safety, not a threat to your autonomy. You've spent so much time building your self. Now it's time to use that self for something bigger than just looking good in a mirror or a bank statement. It's time to build a we. Because at the end of the day, the man who wins alone doesn't really win at all. I want you to take a second and look at the trajectory of your life. If you keep following this optimized path of emotional distance, where do you end up in 10 years? You might have the body you wanted, the car you wanted, and the bank account you dreamed of. But if you have no one who truly knows the man behind the metrics, you haven't built a life. You've built a museum dedicated to a version of yourself that doesn't actually exist. Think about it this way. There is a massive difference between being a man who is high value and a man who has high depth. Value is what you can provide, but depth is why someone stays. I remember reading a study about regret in later life, and not a single man on his deathbed said, "I wish I had been more emotionally unavailable." Not one man said, "I wish I had kept my guard up more during that argument in 2026. The regrets are always about the moments where they chose pride over presence. They regret the times they were in the same room as the person they love, but they were 1,000 miles away behind a wall of logic or discipline. You've been told that being at the top is lonely, but I'm here to tell you that it's only lonely if you climbed the wrong mountain. If your version of success requires you to amputate your ability to be vulnerable, you aren't winning, you're paying a tax that no amount of money can cover. You're trading your oxytocin, the chemical of bonding and long-term peace, for cortisol and testosterone. Alone, you're trying to survive a marathon on a sprinter's fuel. The strongest men I have ever met, the ones who actually lead empires and families that adore them, are those who have the cognitive complexity to be both a warrior in the world and a safe harbor at home. They don't just have frame, they have range. So, if you've been feeling like a robot lately, if you've been winning the day but losing your soul, I want you to know it's because you're trying to run a human operating system on science, software that was never designed to handle the complexity of love. So, how do we actually fix this? Because I'm not here to tell you to become soft or to abandon your drive. I want you to be a man of impact. But I want you to be a man who is actually present for his own life. We need to move you from optimization to integration. Here is how you dismantle the wall without losing your edge. The first step is to redefine what frame actually means. In the bro world, having frame means being the person who cares the least. It's a power struggle. But in a high-level relationship, real frame is emotional containment. Think about it this way. If your partner is having a hard day and she's emotional or chaotic, a weak man gets defensive or shuts down because he can't handle the threat to his peace. A man with true frame is like a sturdy house in a storm. The storm is happening outside, but inside the house, it's warm and still. To do that, you have to stop seeing her emotions as an attack on your logic and start seeing them as an opportunity to be the foundation. You aren't losing. By listening, you are demonstrating that you are too solid to be shaken by a few words. The second step is what I call the vulnerability audit. I want you to look at your hobbies and your grind with brutal honesty. I remember working with a guy who was obsessed with ultra marathons. He told me it was about discipline, but after 3 sessions, we realized he was running because at the only time he had a valid excuse not to answer his wife's phone calls. He wasn't building grit, he was practicing avoidance. Ask yourself, is your 90-minute gym session at 8:00 p.m. about your health, or is it a way to avoid the intimacy of the wine dower with your partner? Discipline is a virtue, but using discipline to hide from your feelings is just a sophisticated form of cowardice. True discipline is staying in the room when a conversation gets uncomfortable. The third step is a tactical shift. Micro disclosures. You've been told that opening up means dumping all your trauma on the table and crying for 3 hours. That's not what I'm suggesting. That's flooding, and it's actually counterproductive. Instead, I want you to follow the 1% rule. Share one non-tactical truth every day. Think about the difference between saying work was busy and saying, I felt a lot of pressure during that meeting today. The first one is a report. The second one is a bridge. You aren't asking her to fix the pressure. You're just letting her see the weather inside your head. When you do this, you train your brain to stop viewing your internal world as a weakness that needs to be hidden. And you start inviting her to be your teammate rather than just a spectator of your life. Now, I know some of you are thinking, Matthew, this sounds nice, but feelings don't pay the bills or protect my family. I hear you, but I want to show you the actual science of what happens to your brain when you buy into this hyper-independent bro culture. This isn't just about vibes, it's about your biological wiring. I remember reading about the Grant study out of Harvard. It's one of the most significant pieces of research ever conducted. They followed a group of men for nearly 80 years, from their youth all the way to their deathbeds. They tracked their bank accounts, their health, their career success, and their IQ. And after nearly a century of data, the conclusion wasn't that the most alpha or self-reliant men were the happiest or most successful. The single greatest predictor of long-term health, brain function, and even financial success was the quality of their close relationships. The science is clear. Isolation is a biological stressor. When you optimize for being alone, you are literally telling your nervous system that you are in a state of constant survival. Think about it through the lens of attachment theory. Most of this alpha content is actually a masterclass in how to develop a dismissive, avoidant attachment style. This is a psychological defense mechanism where, because you're afraid of being controlled or rejected, you preemptively decide that you don't need people at all. You tell yourself, I am the prize, I am the rock, I am detached. But here is the psychological trap. When you chronically suppress your high attachment system, you aren't just turning off the bad feelings. You're turning off the hardware. There is a concept in neurobiology called psychoregulation. It's the way two human beings' nervous systems calm each other down. When you see your partner and your heart rate slows, or when a simple touch lowers your cortisol levels. That's co-regulation. By following a blueprint of being emotionally unavailable, you are effectively cutting the wires to your own stress relief system. You are trying to regulate your stress entirely through solo activities. Gym, work hobbies, which is like trying to charge a Tesla with an AA battery. It's exhausting, and eventually you burn out. You become irritable, cynical, and numb. I want you to think about the window of tolerance. This is a psychological term for the zone where you can handle emotions effectively. When you adopt this bro mentality of nothing affects me, you aren't actually expanding your window of tolerance. You're just shrinking your world so that nothing enters the window. You're becoming resilient by becoming small. I remember a study on emotional granularity, the ability to name specific emotions. Men who are taught to just be stoic usually only have two settings: I'm fine or I'm pissed. But when you can't identify what you're feeling, you can't process it. It stays in your body. It shows up as back pain, as insomnia, as a shorter temper with the person you love most. You think you're being rational by staying detached. But the most rational thing you can do is acknowledge that you are a social mammal. Your brain is literally hardwired to seek connection. When you deny that, you aren't being high value. You're being malfunctional, God. You're fighting against your own biology to maintain an image that some guy on the internet told you was masculine. Think about a cup. We usually value a cup for its material, whether it's made of gold, clay, or fine porcelain. We spend our lives trying to make our cup look as expensive and high value as possible, but ancient wisdom teaches us that the utility of the cup is not in its walls, it is in its emptiness. If a cup is already full of concrete, it can't hold any water. It's useless. Many of you have spent years filling your cup with concrete. You've filled it with ego, with status, and with this rigid idea of who you are supposed to be. You've become so solid, so full of yourself that there is no room left for a partner to pour their love into you. You've made yourself a solid block of stone, wondering why you're thirsty. I remember reading a parable about an ancient warrior, a man who had survived 100 battles because he never took off his armor. He was the envy of every man in the kingdom. He was unbreakable. But when he finally returned home, he realized he had a problem. He couldn't feel the breeze on his skin. When he sat down to eat, the armor was too bulky to let him reach the table. And most painfully, when his youngest child ran to him for a hug, all the child felt was cold, hard steel. The warrior was safe, yes, but he was also a prisoner. This is exactly what bro self-help is doing to your psychology. It's giving you a suit of armor and telling you it's a lifestyle. It's telling you that stoicism means being a statue. But the original Stoics, men like Marcus Aurelius, weren't statues. They were deeply feeling men who practiced the art of not being overwhelmed by those feelings. There is a massive difference between being a mountain that stands firm in the rain and being a rock that doesn't know it's raining at all. Think about it this way: in nature, the things that are most rigid are the things that are dead. A dead branch is stiff, it breaks in a storm. A living branch is flexible, it bends, it yields, and because it can move with the wind, it survives. When you tell yourself, I don't care what she thinks, or I don't need anyone's validation, you aren't being a mountain, you're being a dead branch. You're trying to achieve strength by removing your humanity. But your humanity is where your power actually lives. It's the only part of you that a woman can actually fall in love with. She can admire your armor, sure. She can respect your castle walls, but she can't love them. Love requires a soft landing spot, and if you've turned your entire personality into a weapon, there's nowhere for her to land. You've been told that being unavailable makes you attractive because it creates dread or mystery. And in the short term, for a casual hookup, that might work. It might trigger a chase. But we aren't talking about a game of cat and mouse. We're talking about your life. You're sacrificing the possibility of being truly known just so you can feel in control. Is that really the trade you want to make? To be the most optimized man in the room